Unfortunately, messed up cops are just a part of history.
Former Louisville police officer Mark Handy was accused of framing innocent men and sending them to prison for murder.
And when you think about crooked cops, you usually think about cops who maybe steal money from big drug raids, deleting people, planting evidence, the normal stuff you see on TV. Thing is, it had me wondering, is Louis Scarcella the worst cop in New York City history? The interesting thing is, Louis Scarcella didn't start off as the poster child for shady detective work. He was one of NYPD's most famous detectives in the 90s. You see, during that time, crime was bad. You had gangs, mafias, serial killers. For example, in 1991, there were over 2,000 homicide victims. For comparison, in NYC in 2023, homicides were as low as 386. And murders weren't the only crimes at all-time highs. Shootings, robberies, there were 3 times as many essays in 1990 as opposed to 2023.
He threw me over the man's head in front of me. But he didn't let me go. He held on to me. And so I remember the yellow tile.
And with all this violence, the city, understandably, was begging for solutions and a greater police presence.
Statistics this year are really grim.
Because there's too few cops and there's too many guns in the city of New York.
Our criminal justice system is probably at its weakest point it's ever been.
There are a lot more guns on the street, and that's probably it. The gun laws, the courts, the way they're letting people out, it's just like that all the time. It's going to be a lot more killings, too.
The city was on fire. Normal citizens were fed up, and you could see the table being set up for someone like Scarcella to step in. And he did. By 1987, Scarcella rose to the rank of detective and joined the Brooklyn North Homicide Squad. And it was during this time he became heralded as one of the best detectives in the city. According to Scarcella, he states, "I don't know how many homicides I caught. Some people say 140, some say 170, some say over 200. I really don't know how many." And it's true. Scarcella was prolific at closing cases, especially cases that went cold, like Rabbi Haskell Wurzburger, a Holocaust survivor that was murdered in a fumbled robbery. Weeks went by, and homicide detectives were at a loss. Add to the fact that there was a public outcry for justice, the pressure was mounting for the police to solve this case. And rightfully so. Wurzburger was a well-respected member of the Jewish community, but months had passed before it hit Scarcella's desk. Now, according to a GQ article by Sean Flynn, he states, Scarcella and his partner found 2 men who said they were accomplices, and they fingered a guy named David Ranta as the shooter. Now, this case was strange in every way possible. First, Dimitri Dirkman, the convicted R-word, didn't initially name Ranta. He pointed out a man named Alan Bloom. Bloom would then name Ranta, and so would Dirkman when the two were housed together in a cell. But an investigation found that the two were allowed to leave jail, smoke crack cocaine, and have intercourse with prostitutes in return for implicating Ranta.
What?
But it would get even weirder, because during the lineup, according to the National Registry for Exonerations, one of the witnesses only spoke Yiddish and required an interpreter. Initially said he didn't recognize anyone. The witness was then escorted to a nearby room with Detective Scarcella, a prosecutor, and the interpreter. A tape recorder, which was recording the lineup conversation, was then turned off and then turned back on, as the witness said, in fact, he had identified the man in position 6, which was Ranta.
As I was walking in from the back, somebody told me, "Oh, it's the guy with the long nose."
One witness tells investigators a cop back then asked him to pick the guy with the big nose and only picked Ranta in court later because that's what he was told to do during the lineup.
Now, with all that, David Ranta was found guilty and sentenced to 37 to life. And it wasn't until 2011 when District Attorney Charles Hines created the Conviction Integrity Unit that his case would be reviewed. And it was that investigation that exonerated Ranta.
Mr. Ranta, to say that I'm sorry for what you have endured would be an understatement and grossly inadequate, but I say it to you anyway. Sir, you are free to go.
So, this was a watershed moment for Scarcella. Remember, in the 90s, Scarcella was a hero, with a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist saying he is one of the best at getting even the worst villains to talk. In big cases, they bring in Scarcella. But all that would change in May of 2013, when a New York Times article written by Frances Robles uncovered several problematic behaviors in Scarcella's method. In her article, Robles found a strange similarity in the confessions Scarcella was receiving. In at least 4 more murder cases, suspects questioned by Mr. Scarcella began their confessions with either, "You got it right," or "I was there." And this was the case for Jabbar Washington, who in 1996 was convicted of murdering Ronald Ellis. According to Washington and his lawyer, Scarcella forcibly obtained his confessions, with the article stating, "The detective," he said, grabbed him by the neck and testicles, and forced him to sign his name to the document the detective wrote. That confession was the basis of the prosecution's case, since the survivors of the shooting couldn't identify Washington in court. But that didn't stop Scarcella from testifying to the fact that he had an eyewitness to the crime.
Detective Scarcella lied on the witness stand about the sole eyewitness identifying Javar Washington. That eyewitness never identified Javar Washington as the person who committed the crime or the person who was there in the apartment that night. All she did was identify him correctly as somebody who had lived in the building.
And it's true. During cross-examination, Washington's lawyer asked if the confession was important to the case, and Scarcella says if he didn't get ID'd, it would have been. But he didn't get ID'd. The truth was, Lisa Todd, the witness and one of the victims, literally told a grand jury that she only recognized Washington because he lived in the building. And it wasn't just Scarcella. The prosecution in his closing arguments hammered the fact that there was an eyewitness, even though there wasn't one. And unfortunately for Javar Washington, he would have to serve 21 years in prison before having his conviction vacated in 2017. And it didn't stop there. Vanessa Gathers, Shabaka Shakur, Sean Williams. Vanessa Gathers was threatened with jail time if she didn't sign a confession, which, of course, then gave her jail time. Or Sean Williams, who the witness, Margaret Smith, says she was forced to name Williams as the murderer even though she didn't see the killers. Or the two actual eyewitnesses who said that the shooters were 5'2" and 5'6", and Williams was 6 feet tall. Smith even went into detail. She admitted that she falsely identified Williams, but said that she felt pressure to do what she believed the detectives wanted her to do. Smith also said she only identified Williams in a live lineup because she already seen his photograph. A photograph that Scarcella showed her when pressuring her to identify Williams.
Smith Leddy relocated to Georgia from Brooklyn to escape the officers' coercion, but they tracked her down and held her in custody as a material witness until she testified.
But it doesn't end there, because a much different coincidence began occurring, starting with Alvina Jeanette, Robert Hill, and Daryl Austin. Now, these cases are confusing, but the one thing that didn't make sense was the fact that there was one main witness to 3 separate murders on 3 separate dates. And that witness was Teresa Gomez, a drug addict and prostitute. She told Scarcella that she saw Robert Hill murder a man named Donald Man Bordes. And then about a week later, she then told Scarcella that she saw Robert Hill also murder a man named Bruce Siblings. And then later, magically, tell Scarcella that she witnessed Jeanette and Austin murder Ronnie Durant. All of 3 of which, coincidentally, were already the target of Scarcella's investigation. So, the first trial was Robert Hill for the murder of Bruce Siblings, which Teresa Gomez was a supposed witness. Now, at that trial, Gomez had testified that she was hiding in the closet of a crack house and looked through the keyhole to see Hill put a pillow over Siblings' head and shoot him. But later, an investigator who had visited the scene of the shooting and testified that there was no keyhole in the door of the closet where Gomez said she was hiding at the time Siblings was shot. Gomez also stated in Robert Hill's trial that she hadn't witnessed anything regarding the Man Bordes murder. Which brings us to the Man Bordes murder, in which somehow she was still the star witness, despite literally saying she didn't see anything. And then in the Jeanette and Austin trial, there were witnesses that affirmed that the two had nothing to do with the murders, but that information wasn't given to the defense. Now, fortunately, the 3 would have their convictions vacated. Unfortunately, Daryl Austin would die in prison, with Jeanette saying, "The last time I saw my brother was in sentencing. The next time I seen him was in a casket." And it wasn't just this case. Teresa Gomez would go on to actually be a star witness in a total of 6 different murder cases for Scarcella. But the case that changed everything was Derek Hamilton. See, Hamilton was convicted in 1991 for the murder of Nathaniel Cash in his apartment building in Brooklyn, New York. The key witness in that case, Jules Smith, Cash's girlfriend, told Detective Frank DeLuisa that she had bailed Cash out of jail on January 3rd and spent time with him at his apartment before going to the store. When she returned, he was lying on the ground after being shot. But later she changed her statement when talking to Detective Scarcella to implicating Hamilton. So the question is why? Why the change? Well, according to the registry, Smith said that Detective Scarcella told her that if she did not accuse Hamilton, she would be charged with the crime herself.
They brought a witness in by the name of Jules Smith, who said that she was present at the murder when her boyfriend was killed, that I was a gunman, I had a gun in my hand, and I shot this individual several times with this gun. But her original statement to the police said she wasn't there, that she never saw this crime. She was around the corner at a store. When she came back, her boyfriend was dead. The jury never heard that statement.
But before sentencing, Smith would later recant, saying she only implicated Hamilton after Scarcella told her she would be charged with the murder if she didn't change her account. And to Hamilton's credit, he wouldn't take this lying down. While in prison, he began to study law, helping other inmates with appeals while working on his own.
And at that point, I began a crusade, because when I was in prison, there were several guys. We built something called the Actual Innocence Team. Guys who I was working in the law library, so I would read guys' case and check them out.
But it was during his parole that he would be connected with Frances Robles. Now, Robles would go on to talk about presenting the story to her editor and being asked what connects these cases. Because even though Hamilton knew the victims, he didn't know all the details. But through his connections with the inmates in prison, he would encourage his friend and fellow Scarcella victim, Shabaka Shakur, to talk to Robles. The meeting would supply Robles with the names of other inmates and corroborating information linking Scarcella and his suspicious convictions. This is where she would learn about Teresa Gomez, Scarcella's seemingly favorite witness. And how did she find a link? A Google search with both their names. It was like some random Google form, a cigar smoker forum, where someone had asked the question, "When did you smoke your first great cigar?" She continues. A man answers, "The first cigar which truly made me realize I was going to enjoy cigars was smoked in 1988 at a bar on Remington Street in Brooklyn. The cigar was given to me by the legendary detective of the Brooklyn North homicide named Louis Scarcella. Louis had been the detective on the first 2 murder cases I prosecuted, both of which featured the same witness testifying against the same defendant for 2 different murders. The defendant was a dealer named Robert Hill. The witness was named Teresa Gomez." Robles would then go to the prison holding Robert Hill to get his account. And it was around this time Robles began looking for statements from the district attorney's office when she learned that all of Scarcella's cases were being reviewed. And on May 11th, 2013, Frances "Frenchie" Robles dropped a bomb of an article, shedding light on the several instances of misconduct that led to the reopening of 50 of Scarcella-involved cases. And for Scarcella, he's maintained that he's never coerced or forced any confessions, or that he never fabricated any evidence. And according to the district attorney's office in New York, they stated that Scarcella has not broken any laws or committed any punishable acts. Which I don't understand. The man has several accusations of forced confessions. We've documented several instances where he's tampered with witnesses, and one of the people he put in jail wrongfully is dead. But hey, I'm not a lawyer, so what do I know? What I do know is that so far there are nearly 20 overturned convictions and over $100 million in settlements paid out to the wrongfully convicted. And I suspect that number will grow as the investigations continue. So let me know what you think. Should Scarcella face prison time? And please like and subscribe if you liked the video.